our students and alumni for joining the call as well. So my name is Jenith. I'm the North America Opportunities Manager based in St Andrews, and I'm part of the Careers Service team. So these types of sessions are a great way to hear from alumni directly about their individual journeys since leaving St Andrews. We're very fortunate in the community that we have and how engaged our alumni are, and we really appreciate you all joining us today, especially at the moment. So this session is in partnership with our US development team, and so I'm going to hand over to Leah so she can introduce herself and her team.
Thanks so much, Jenith, and thank you all for joining us today, and particularly to our panelists for being with us. So I'll quickly introduce myself and the rest of our US development team. As Jenith mentioned, I'm Leah Dalton, and I'm the manager of alumni and family engagement for the United States. I work remotely from Maryland, along with 3 other colleagues who are with us on the call, who are also based in the US. So we have Catherine Humphreys, who is our head of development for the US, and she is located outside of Philadelphia. We have Lily Wen, who's a gift officer in California, covering the western half of the country. And we have Moira Sharkey, who is a gift officer based in Massachusetts, covering the eastern half of the country. So as a team, we work together to strengthen and build our community of alumni, parents, and supporters and students in the US. And we work to build our network through events like this, of course, typically in person when we can, and we also grow our philanthropic support for the university from our US community. So I will add our contact details to the chat box. Please feel free to reach out to any of us at any time. We're so glad to have you with us. And now back to you, Jenith, and our panelists.
Thanks, Leah. And so for everyone joining us on the call today, feel free to use the chat function to ask any questions that you might have for our panel. And there'll be an opportunity later for your questions to be answered. You'll also be able to unmute, share your camera, and ask the questions face-to-face as well towards the end. Okay, so I'd like to kick things off by asking you all to introduce yourselves. So Irene, I'm going to come to you first.
Hi, my name is Irene Fitzsimmons. I graduated St Andrews in 2007, and the reason I say that is because I walked into a writer's strike and then a massive recession, so I have some idea of what it's like starting off a career in that environment. I'm a director of production over at Viacom CBS, which means that we sort of oversee production and sort of production logistics for Viacom brands such as MTV, Paramount Network, Comedy Central, TV Land, VH1, and sort of Nickelodeon, Nick Jr., the list goes on. I started my career as a freelancer in New York, and I'm currently in LA. Sort of went from working on live events and indie films and some sort of commercials and short forms, and then sort of went into more of a corporate path. So yeah, that's where I am now.
Awesome, thank you. Caroline, I'll come to you next.
So I graduated in '99, and then I was a Bobby Jones Scholar, which is what brought me to Atlanta in the first place. And I started as an intern at CNN on the international desks. And after a few sort of bounces around between here, London, Mexico, other parts of the world, I have ended up as the head of the desks. So we run the international news coverage for CNN from 4 hubs in the main, from Atlanta, Hong Kong, Abu Dhabi, and London, but we have 36 bureaus, and we provide all the international content for all of CNN's platforms, both TV, mobile, and digital.
Perfect, thank you. And Aaron, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name's Aaron. I graduated from St Andrews in 2012. I'm now a business development manager at Google on the Google Play team. And before this, I've been in the gaming industry for a little while. I was at 2K Games and Take-Two Interactive, where I worked on games like Borderlands 3 and Civilization 6 and the NBA 2K franchise. And then I moved to Pocket Gems, which is a mobile games developer in San Francisco, where I worked on their games, War Dragons and Pocket Gems. War Dragons and Episode, excuse me. And then I jumped to Google, where I now work with the sort of the top mobile gaming developers on the platform to do a number of things. Mainly it's to grow their business on Google Play by using sort of the data and insights that we have with Google. The other part is to work with our product teams to make sure that we're building features that help those developers. And then I also lead up this sort of somewhat new initiative that helps manage big cross Google deals that includes our other verticals like cloud and ads and hardware.
Awesome, thank you. So moving on to the questions, Caroline, I'm going to come to you first. Why do you love the work that you do?
Oh gosh, so many reasons. I get to work with incredible people all around the world. That's always been really important to me. Just really, the times that I've left CNN to go and be a stay-at-home mum or whatever, the thing that I've really missed are the people that we work with. They're really smart, they really care, they're really diverse, and I just love that sort of learning aspect of it every day. But also something that I'm passionate about. I have a very well, I need to be constantly learning, as I'm sure we all do, and something like international journalism, you just can't know it all. You're spending your whole time learning something new every day, and hopefully shedding light on things that otherwise would just be going unforeseen. So there's a sort of it feels like a vocation as much as it feels like a career.
Perfect, thank you. And Irene, I'll ask you the same question. Why do you love the work that you do?
I think it's sort of the same thing. It's the sort of the variation and the change of new problems. I get to have a job where I get to take fiction and make it reality and turn it back into fiction again. And that takes, a lot of creative problem solving, a lot of collaboration, meeting people from all kind of walks of life. Like I work with executives, and then I work with PAs, and I work with people who have skilled union workers and actors, and you kind of end up in different locations, and it's just very, it's fun. It's difficult, but it's a lot of fun. And I feel like I'm constantly, as soon as I figure out that I feel like I know what I'm doing and I know my job, something new happens and I'm sort of toppled over and I have to sort of rethink my strategy. And I think that's why I love my job.
Great, thank you. So Aaron, I'll come to you next. How did your time at the University of St Andrews affect your career path?
There's a somewhat easy answer to that question in that, as you can tell from my accent, I am, from the UK originally. I did meet my wife at St Andrews, and she's from America, and that sort of certainly made coming over to the US somewhat easier. However, I've always been interested in gaming, even at St Andrews, and while I wouldn't say necessarily that my degree led me down the path towards gaming in the same way. I studied English literature, and I guess there are some parallels between reading about stories and creating immersive worlds. But really, it was my interest throughout university, and coming out of university and moving to the Bay Area, where it's the Bay Area is, I would say, the intersection between tech and the sort of that creative space, and that is symbolized. That takes effect in gaming, right? And so moving here really helped in getting into the industry, where I was able to join the 2K team and start working on some of those big console games, and then made the jump to mobile.
Perfect, thank you. And so Irene, you kind of mentioned this in your intro, but what advice would you give to students who will be navigating the job market in the next few years?
I think that the barrier to entry, especially in production, is very different now. I think that a lot of people, you can reach out to people now in a completely different way than you were when I was starting. And like a lot of people will not respond, and that's fine. I don't always respond, and it's nothing to do with the other person. It's the fact that I have 8 million other things going on. I think if you want to make content, also just go make content. One of the best advices that I got was, if you want to be a producer, produce something. And you can do so on your own a lot easier now than you used to be able to. So sort of, fill out kind of what you want to do, and then take whatever job you can. Like, as any profession that you have, as long as you're working. When I started, I took every single awful job that someone would throw at me, just because I would learn something, even if it was a good or bad experience. So that's sort of my advice.
Thank you. And Caroline, how has the media and entertainment world responded to COVID-19?
It's been a busy year. Let's just start there. So I don't know, in the course of my career, outside of 9/11 coverage, that there's been another story that we've covered that impacts everyone that works in our industry in the same way. So normally in the kind of work I do, I'm sending my crews out to war zones and, on stories. And it's those field teams that are impacted by what they do. Whereas with a story like this is so close to home. So that, my teams that are working in the offices, on the news desk, that wouldn't normally be on that sort of front line, have been involved in this story and impacted by the story just as much as the field teams that are out there doing it. So it's been something that clearly, resonates. This is one of those stories where the old cliche goes that we're sitting at the front line of history, right? This is the time that we are going to be talking to our grandkids about. And that just makes it resonate in ways that, we hope for all the time with our stories. But this one has been really different. And I think what it's done is it's just been really all-consuming. I mean, we have been, aside from the US election, coronavirus has been the one story that we have all been focused on this year, but we've been able to come at it from so many different directions because we can talk about it from every global perspective, all the ways the world are dealing with it differently. All of those storylines really play to that kind of a new global phenomenon that lives in a new global era, and so it's been really exciting to cover it in terms of being able to really bring all those strands together.
Great, thank you. And Aaron, how has your organisation adapted to virtual life?
Compared to most, Google, I would say, has been hit slightly less by the impact of COVID. Culturally, I've only been at the company for a year and a half now, a year and a bit. But even before COVID hit, we were already doing a lot of our work remotely, meeting with teams in New York and San Francisco and wherever, over Hangouts, which is Meet, which is the Zoom equivalent. Like, in that way, it hasn't changed. But I will say that having, worked pretty closely with game developers and, unlike maybe the movie or film industry, where you need to be on set to be able to film, you can make a game from your computer in your basement. But I think the thing that people struggle with is actually like trying to be creative remotely, as opposed to everybody gathered in a room around a whiteboard, like talking about game design, mechanics, whatever it is. It's slightly harder to do that when you're doing it doing it virtually in 2D.
Thanks.
Can I just weigh in there, because this is something I'm really super passionate about. So one of the things I'm really hoping comes out the back of this is I'm hoping that this has just created a whole new brand of the way people work, and we'll see whether this sticks, right? But I just think there are so many positives that have come out from working from home. Yes, we've had to be really careful with making sure that people who are working from home and are disconnected, particularly people who are perhaps on their own, they don't have people to talk to all day, or parents who are dealing with schooling. We've had to pay really careful attention to those team members, but it's also opened up this world of possibilities. So for us, we've been able to work with perhaps parents who haven't had the opportunity to go back full time, but now can, because they're working from home and they can juggle life-work balance better. We've also seen a really massive impact in sort of the diversity, socioeconomic diversity of the people we're able to hire. So whereas perhaps before people had to go to a big hub, a city, to do an internship, to start off their careers when they didn't have much money at that place, actually this has opened up a whole new world of possibilities. We can hire people from wherever they are in the globe, set them up reasonably cheaply and easily with the gear that they need to be able to dial into our systems. And we've also been able to offer that to our employees. So I work with this really global team, and they've been able to go home and work from their home bases in ways that they were not able to before, and see their families in ways that they might not have done, over the course of an entire year. So there's some really exciting stuff coming out of it that I hope that kind of we, as this kind of middle management layer that are up and coming as the new managers, are able to really push forward, because I think that's a massive shift.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And Irene, what are the skills and experience that your organisation is looking for?
I mean, it's a massive organization. I think that communication is sort of key, especially when we are all remote. And then it's, just in general, the sort of being pragmatic and creative, I think are the two, which it's kind of a holy grail, but are the two biggest skill sets I would say organizations looking for.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm just going to pause there at the moment just to remind everyone to use the chat function to drop some questions in for our panel, because we'll get to that section shortly. Okay, so Caroline, I'm going to come back to you. How has the sector changed in the last few years? What do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10?
It's changed massively just in the past 5. So we are a TV legacy organisation, right? We're sort of a cable news. I mean, it's in our name. And that just ain't the way that people consume their news anymore. I mean, sure, it isn't the way that any of you consume your news. Most people get it from mobile phones, frankly. They read it on the train on the way into work. That's what they wake up in the morning, and that's how they digest their news. So this shift to sort of a multi-platform universe and also a direct-to-consumer universe is massively important. And what's so exciting about that is, to me, it does 2 things. A, it goes back to the sort of core essence of journalism, in the sense that if the stories are right, and if we're finding the right characters, and if we're explaining it in the right way, these stories resonate on all of these platforms. It doesn't, the platforms are just what they are. They're the shop windows. The stories are really what counts. So it's brought us back to that kind of core essence of journalism. But also it's allowed us to have super real feedback from our audience members. So whereas with a TV newscast, in our case, you'd have a sort of executive editor who would decide, what the important stories of the day were and what order they should come in. Actually, on a digital platform, in real time, the audience are telling you whether they care about that story or not. And if they're not caring about that story, it's on us to then find a way to make it resonate in a way that will matter to them. And so, mixing it up, coming at it from a different angle, finding the right character for it, it just makes us work harder as an industry. And I really love that. I think it's really pushed us to sort of push and drive forward on finding ways to connect to the audience.
That's great, thank you. Aaron, what do you wish you'd known when you started out your career?
That's a great question. I actually went to my wife for some tips on this one, because she's had a couple of these already. I think the one thing that I would advise everybody to do is, and this is not new, but really think about building out your network as best you can. Every job that I've gotten has come through networking and being able to get those internal referrals that mean that people actually look at your resume. And without that, you're literally just throwing a resume on the top of a massive pile if you just submit it online. So to the extent that's possible, I wouldn't even bother applying online anymore. I would only apply if you're getting those internal referrals. And that was news to me, maybe a little sad, but it also gives you the kick to start thinking about it. I would also say that, social capital is really important. Every interaction with folks is an interview, if you really think about it. So, when you're asking people to take 50 minutes out of their day to have an informational interview, or, virtual coffee or whatever it is nowadays, really do think about that as an interview, because ultimately you want that person to be your advocate at whatever company you're thinking about applying to. Yeah, I think the last one, and it's a little tough in hindsight, I think, but really try and learn the language of the industry that you're trying to get into. And it's some of this, but I could have done loads more when I was trying to get into gaming. There are just terms and words and things that people take for granted when they've been in the industry forever. And if you're not speaking that same language, those same people will really struggle to see you in the industry with them. And it's as easy as, reading industry articles, finding a couple books, going deep as best you can. You'll learn a lot on the job, but doing a little bit of that legwork in advance will really help in the interview process. One last bit of advice is, I went to a load of people when I left St. Andrews and said, hey, I have this degree, but I don't really know what to do with it. I know I want to be in gaming or film or whatever. What can I do? What should I do? Tell me. And invariably that person has absolutely no idea what you're good at or what you could be good at. So don't ask that question. If you're going into any informational interview, you have to go into it with, here's a role that I'm interested in, I want to learn more about it. Or can you tell me more about your industry broadly? But don't ask them where they think you would fit. Really, it's up to you to then figure out where you should fit and find those jobs and apply to them.
Yeah. Thank you. So Irene, is there a standout moment in your career which was a real step change, and how did you bring this about?
So a standout moment in my career, there have been a couple of them. I think that, I actually got my first job through an ad on Mandy.com and not through networking, and then through that was networking. But I think that I had a movie that went to Sundance. That was pretty big, and that kind of exposed me to a lot of people. Switching from a freelance career to a corporate career was a sort of a big moment too. But yeah, it's a little bit, as sort of Aaron puts it, it's trying to sort of figure out where, what you are as a brand. You're selling yourself to a lot of people constantly. I think I came into the job market a lot more formal than what my industry asks and expects. And so it actually, I showed up with a full cover letter and a full resume, and in like business casual, walking into a producer's office, and he's just like, he calls me, and I had the worst cold ever. I took the subway back to Brooklyn, just wanted to go to sleep, and he calls me and he's like, you're hired, you can skip the business casual dress and like come in your jeans, I know you're sick. So I think there have been a couple of those moments, and they've all kind of shaped who I am a little bit now in my professional life.
Thank you. And Caroline, can you talk a bit about progression and remaining challenged when staying with one organisation?
Way to make me feel old. Thanks. No, joking. So listen, I'm a really terrible person to advocate for this, because basically what I do is I get bored after 3 years and then switch jobs. It clearly hasn't done me all bad, but I do the classic thing where I take a job, I force myself to take jobs that I think are overwhelming, like too big for me. I force myself to kind of get myself out of my little British female mentality and always go for something that I think is going to really stretch me or that I'm not capable of, and just give it a go. Sometimes I get it, which is then terrifying. So I spend the first year being terrified of the job that I'm doing. I spend the second year beginning to feel more comfortable and beginning to figure out that I probably can do it. And if there are still things I've got to learn, but it's all right, I've got it under control. And then by the third year, I'm just, I'm beginning to lose interest. And that's when I need to move on. And I've done that like clockwork through the course of my career. Now, I am not advocating for this as a great way to run your career. It's paid off for me in some respects, it hasn't in others. But I would say just, only it's on you, right? I mean, only you are able to work out what it is that your career needs to look like. And some of it's going to be luck, but sometimes you make your own luck. So putting yourself in the right, in the right positions, trying to figure out what the future is going to look like and how you might be able to play into that, relationship building, all those things that we've, talked about are really, really important, because those are the things that do pay off. And then it's a question of finding ways, and only you will know how to do that, of keeping yourself challenged and engaged. Because let's face it, a lot of it is grind, right? And the best way to advertise yourself for a future job is to be good at your current job. So a lot of this is just going to be damn hard work where you're feeling like you're not recognized, especially in your 30s for whatever reason. That just seems to be the era where you feel like you're doing all the work, your managers are taking all the credit, and nobody is recognizing what you're doing. You have a few, really long years during that kind of decade of your life, and then there's a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel again, kind of a little later on as you then make the step into sort of slightly more senior management. So so I think the thing is just to find ways to be passionate about it. And if your managers aren't giving you that, go out and search for them yourselves, find ways to do it.
Perfect, thank you. So is there any questions from anyone on the call? Feel free to put your camera on, unmute, or, oh, we've got one in the chat. That's just loading for me. Oh. So Caroline, what was your path after St Andrews into journalism and CNN?
So I honestly, I fell into it, I think, in some ways. So I also did an English degree, and I did an English degree because I knew I wanted to be a journalist. And in the UK, everybody that I spoke to said, don't do a journalism degree, do an academic degree, because then you'll have more options. So merrily, I went off and did my English degree, moved to the States on the Bob Jones Scholarship, started interning at CNN because frankly I was bored of studying by that stage, at which point everyone stateside turned around to me and said, why didn't you do a journalism degree? So it was one of those I couldn't really win. Much the same as the other two, I've rarely got a job through an interview. I've kind of wriggled my way into roles more often than not, be it through internships, be it through freelancing. You just got to get your foot in the door. And if you get your foot in the door and then work damn hard to keep your foot in that door, that oftentimes is the best way to get in.
That's great, thank you. And so I'll open the next question out to the whole panel. So how did some of you go about networking into an industry you may not have known anyone in before?
I think I can answer this. I feel like you probably do know someone in it, even if it's just peripherally. I had a friend at St Andrews whose sister owns an editorial company. She's an editor, and they own an editorial company in New York. And I think same thing. You just have to see who you currently know, and you probably will know someone at St Andrews because it is so international and diverse. So yeah, I think, and then it's a little bit, like Caroline said, just if you're in a spot, if you're in an internship, take advantage of it and kind of cling to the walls a little bit and make sure that people know who you are.
Yeah,
the only advice I have on top of that is use LinkedIn. I think it was either at St Andrews or soon after I set myself the challenge of trying to get 100 people on LinkedIn. And, it's fairly easy if you do a couple of internships to find those people. You just add everybody that you meet and all your family stuff. And you keep doing that for a little while, and before you know it, you are second or third connections to a bunch of people who could be helpful. And obviously you should also try and leverage the St Andrews network. Or even your, school network or whatever it is. It helps to find those people, and maybe those people don't work at the company you want to work at, but if they work in the industry, they're going to be able to give you some advice. I think when I was looking to get into gaming, I chatted with somebody who was working at a studio based out of Montreal, and her advice was if you want to work at a gaming company, show that you're serious about it, make a game. And so I worked with a couple of friends in the Bay Area for a few months to make a prototype of a game. It went nowhere, but it landed me that first job.
Yeah, and the hardest thing, especially about the transition from university to the workforce, is that you've hit your pinnacle, right? Your first peak. So every year of your life up until there in your education, you kind of have attained something. Moving on to the next year, exam grades, having got your degree, whatever it is. So you are at the top of your game when you leave university. And what you've got to understand is that actually there's a whole new ladder and you've got to start at the bottom of it. So also be really humble, right? Take whatever job you can get, just get in there. You will learn something from it. When I took 6 years out around when my kids were little, and when I came back, because of the turnover in our industry, nobody remembered who I was. And I was reasonably senior before I left. So I had to start right back at the bottom in a technical role on weekends, on overnight shifts. It was awful. I hated every minute of it. But actually, it proved that I was prepared to do it. I learned a whole bunch of skills that I wouldn't have had otherwise. I would never do it again, given the choice. I didn't particularly enjoy it at the time, but it was worth it because it put me back in the space that I wanted to be in. And from there, I was able to kind of parlay it into a different role. So don't turn your nose up at anything. If you can prove that you can be good at the grunt work, people are going to, you know, look at that and realize you're a hard worker and want you as part of their team. There's an awful lot to be said for that.
Yeah, I mean, to Caroline's point, one of the first jobs I had as a PA was to hold parking in Williamsburg. And it was in the middle of the night, and I'm on the walkie and I'm there for like 30 minutes to an hour or something. And someone says, Irene, we found the cones. You can leave. And so like the bottom of the ladder is pretty far down, and you show up and you're just like, well, I have a master's in history of art from St. Andrews. And you know, it translates to being a parking cone. So don't be discouraged, and don't be snobby about it. It's fine. And other people are going to be way more successful than you at times. And they might be, but like, it's not forever.
Great, thank you. So the next question, again, I'll open that to all of you. So Joe's interested in the sustainability side of film and was wondering, what is the best way to look for jobs, such as are there any good websites to use to apply?
As in sustainability of like production, or sorry, just not.
Joe, could you clarify that, please? Like an eco PA.
Okay, so there's a company called Earth Angel that we actually work with on the CBS side. They're based out of New York. You know, once you start kind of Googling there, you'll probably get some other suggestions. But that's a good start.
Perfect. Thank you. Does that help, Joe?
Let me fish out the link for it as well, and I'll just send it to you, Joe.
Are there any other questions? Also, feel free to come on camera and chat if you're more comfortable that way. Okay. Whilst we're just getting that link, I have, oh, thank you, that's it there. I have a couple more questions that I can ask. So we're very focused on our students' well-being and not put too much pressure on themselves. Do you have any hints or tips on how you manage your busy and challenging careers to keep mind and body sound? And that's to the whole panel.
Right, well, this one's really hard, isn't it? Because we're all working from home, and it's not working from home, is it? It's living from work. So this is particularly hard in this era because you just can't get away from work ever, really, it feels like. There's a couple of things where you've got to set really rigid boundaries. You've got to understand that you won't be at your best if you're at your wit's end. So you have got to make it a priority to step back. And sometimes when you step back, that's when your best ideas come. So take yourself out for a walk, you know, clock off when you can, have dinner with your family or friends, whatever it is. Just, you know, make that a priority, because ultimately it will make you a better employee, even though it's not sort of directly related. And the other thing is to understand that you're not looking for the approval of others. You've got to approve of yourself. So you've got to know that you're, you know, doing the work that is needed, and you're doing it to the best of your ability, but it's not consuming your life, which will then denigrate the product that you're able to put out. A lot of times I think we all look for our manager's approval, and you're not always going to get that, because, you know, they're humans too and they've got their own problems. So it's about knowing in yourself that you're doing the work that is needed, and being okay with that, and kind of losing the FOMO aspect of other people are doing better than me, or my manager's not giving me praise, or whatever. It takes that can really cause you problems.
Okay, thanks. Is there anything else to add?
I think you really covered it there. I have a 1-year-old, and so, you know, I think the biggest struggle for me is juggling, you know, managing, a 1-year-old and at the same time trying to figure out the sort of a relatively new job, I guess, when you really think about it. And I think at the beginning of all of this, I definitely was sort of trying to do too much for no reason other than I felt like I had to. And I think it's just reminding yourself that there really are meant to be only 8 workouts in a day, or whatever it is. You're not going to help anybody by, as Karen was saying, like burning yourself into the ground just to see if you, just to try and show off, I guess. It's not worth it. You should really put up boundaries at the beginning and end of the day as best you can. Google, I think, took a little while to realize this, and then, in the last few months, they've been very strict about enforcing, the time that you're working during the day, recommending you take holiday, all those things. So treat it as best you can, like before.
Perfect, thank you.
And also, don't be afraid to be authentic. I think, at least the things have changed like a lot over the course of my career in this regard. So, very much for me, I was a working parent and I felt like I had to do it all to cover up the fact that I was working parent. I think that's changed. And actually, I think the challenges that we're all dealing with, be it living alone, be it living with kids, be it, whatever the challenges are that you're facing, they make you who you are and they give you a different perspective on your job that probably a lot of other people don't have. So lean into that. Like, don't be afraid to speak from your perspective, whatever that is, because it's valid, and your clients and your customers and your audience members and whoever they are going to relate in some form. And if there's enough diversity in your workplace, that's when you hit the sweet spot. So don't ever feel like you need to hide who you are, because part of who you are is going to make you good at what you do.
Thank you. Okay, so just open that question again to anyone who wants to answer from the panel. But what was your key standout moment during your time at St Andrews University?
I don't know that there are any I want to admit to. Thank you very much.
Academically or socially?
I mean, listen, St Andrews is the most extraordinary place, isn't it? I also met my husband at St Andrews. He was Scottish, dragged him around the world with me. It's a truly unique university experience that I don't know that you get anywhere else. And it is those bonds. I mean, we're all in such a little petri dish in St Andrews. I mean, there's nowhere to go, nothing to do. We have to make our own fun. But actually that creates this extraordinary community and these extraordinary bonds with people that last a lifetime. And that's just, it's such a precious thing. And it's something that you'll be able to lean on for the rest of your time. So enjoy it, know it was extraordinary, and just know that those people are going to be with you for the long haul.
That's great, thanks. Irene, do you have anything to?
No, I mean, the only thing I would sort of add on to that, it's sort of that being in the same sort of pod and having that shared experience translates into your career as well. The people that I have are my strongest connections and my strongest network assets are actually people I came up with. It's not my former boss sending me a recommendation. It's the person I was a coordinator with, or, and I think that's something you learn at St Andrews because it is such a shared experience, that you then can take that on to your career.
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah, I echo both of you in that, the friendships are the thing that have lasted. As I said, I met my wife day one of St Andrews, and a lot of the friends we're still friends with, we met, in some regs, and like that has lasted forever. Not all of them made it out to the US, but that's great because we have friends now all over the world. I went to Tokyo recently and bumped into a bunch of St Andrews friends out there, and it then felt like we were all back at St Andrews. We were able to connect on so many different levels, and it's just so nice to have that global network.
Awesome, thank you. So there's not any more questions that have come through. So I guess we'll just go to kind of wrap everything up. So thank you to our panel for joining us and talking through your careers to date, and we really appreciate your time today. I just want to take a moment to encourage everyone to look at Saint Connect and sign up if you haven't already. There's over 3,000 alumni on there, ready to network and answer any questions that you might have. And I'd also like to direct the students to Career Matters, which is a weekly roundup of what's happening within the career service and any upcoming events. We're having discussions with a number of employers and alumni across sectors who want to do events directly with St Andrews students, so we'll be sharing details on there. So thank you again to our panelists and our students for joining. Thanks.
Thank you.